everybody. Welcome back to our Facebook Live. I'm Hannah Meyer, the director at Nitpicks, and today I've got Lee, our graphic designer. Hi, Lee.
Hi, I'm Lee.
Good morning. Long time no see.
Yeah.
So today we thought because we're all spending a little bit more time at home, that it would be a good time to talk about not only just the usual spring cleaning that everybody at the office does, or at least I do regularly, but to also tackle some other things, like maybe it's a good time to go into your yarn stash and clean things up, or your needle stash and just tidy everything. So I've got the yarn and knitting master here to talk me through what your storage looks like, Lee.
Oof. I like to be organized in my mind. I always have organizational plans, and things in reality are pretty chaotic in my house. But I do try to keep all my projects all neatly in separate bags. So I just have, these are all in progress projects that I'm holding up right now. They're all in their own little bag. I have tote bags all over my house so this is like this is my like everyday project I've been working on. So it's usually just on the couch, but then I have this tote bag full of all the yarn that's like, when I start a new section, I can dig through the bag and decide what yarn I want to use because I'm changing it up. Yeah, so I lots of bags all over my house, piles I try to keep organized. What about you? Are you more organized than me?
I am differently. I also have, I keep calling them my like knitting stations, the little wayposts, where it's like this, in this chair, this is this project. And then over here is another project. And then at work, I have different piles too. I've got my meeting knitting versus my like, oh, I need to listen to a podcast for work, for Nitpicks knitting. So I think I am of the school where many projects for different moods are a good thing. I think you are too,
same.
right?
Yeah, definitely. That's why I have so many bags.
Yeah.
So many projects.
I'm definitely not a like project monogamist.
For sure. Yeah.
So my storage looks a little different, and I don't have any examples up here with me today, but it's very similar to your bags, where like I'll have a project bag size with the drawstring that you have for things like socks, where I'll have both balls of yarn in there, and then my 2 at a time socks, because that's the only way I knit them anymore. And then I use like more of a woven basket with a handle for my projects. And I have a couple of those around the house, much to my husband's dismay. What about things like blankets that are pretty big? How do you store that?
Wow. Yeah. You mention it. I am working on a hue shift right now. So this is, if you've never knit hue shift, it's knit in 4 quadrants. So this is like an in progress quadrant right now. So this is like on top because it's my current one, and then I have all the hue shift yarn. I have my finished one quadrant already finished, just folded up here, and then it's like 2 layers worth of skeins in this big repurposed basket, and like my notes that I'm taking. Yeah, so when I need a color, sometimes I have to pull a bunch out to find a color on the bottom, but you know, they're all condensed into this one little basket here, which I just have on the side of my couch all the time. So that works out pretty well for this giant project.
Right. I noticed that a lot of people are working on the hue shift in our Together We Knit group. So it's been nice to see everyone's projects, and a lot of people buying the kit for the first time. So welcome to the hue shift fan club. Stacy, our outreach director, and now Lee have made them, and it's a really great project, especially for maybe when you've got more time on your hands and you want something a little bit mindless, but also super interesting. And each square is different. I really love that project.
Can I show you what I'm doing with mine? Because
yes, please.
I found that it takes me approximately exactly 1 movie worth of time to knit a square. So I'm only knitting squares to movies, and I have a spreadsheet of what movie I'm knitting to each, movie I'm watching to each square. And then when I'm done, I can have, 100 movies that I watched to my 100 squares.
Wow. Oh, I really like that. I like the idea of either working through your like bucket list of movies or doing it during like award season. I know Stacy
Mhm.
at work does that. She tries to watch all of the, is it the Oscar nominees every year? And so doing that
Mhm.
like with an intention and oh, I like that very much. Oh, it would never
Yeah.
occur to me to do it that way.
It was such an overwhelming project if you're I've never knit a blanket before, so the
Oh,
idea of
really?
100 squares, like it's so big, and so this is a good way to like give me a little extra motivation um add an extra level to it that makes it more fun for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then in this case, are you weaving in your ends as you go, or are you the kind of person who saves it all for the end?
I weave in as I go if I
Yeah.
can. If if they're on the side where you're on a wrong side, like you can't really weave in as you go, or it's a lot harder. So I don't do those. But whenever it's on the right side and it's easy to do, I always do it as I go. Yeah, yeah. I don't want to weave in 200 ends at the end. No, thank
No.
you.
Okay, so now that we've seen some project storage, let's go into how do you store your, actually, let's save yarn for later. Um, why don't we talk about, because it's spring, I know that I am shifting all of my heavier like woolen sweaters into storage and then bring all of my summer knits back out. So more shawls, tanks, things like that, because I know it's not quite warm enough, but it's getting there. And it's definitely
Mhm.
too warm for my Aran weight wool sweaters. So those are going away right
Mhm.
now. Do you have a process that you use to store your knits for the season that you're not wearing them?
I my house doesn't have a lot of like out of the way storage,
Mm-hmm.
so I kind of just have everything in the bedroom all year round, for the most part. But
Mm-hmm.
I, but the current season will be like used and rotated more, and then the out of season knits will be kind of like neatly folded on a shelf that I know I'm not going to be touching for a while. So I'll make sure they're like folded nicely, so they're not going
Mm-hmm.
to get crushed. And I always have a plan to kind of like wash things at the end of the season so they're fresh for when they come back around. But a lot of the time it's more like, oh, I never got around to it. And now it's the beginning of fall. I'm going to be wanting my wool sweater soon. So then, like, usually in the fall, I'll end up just like going through all my wool and
Mm-hmm.
washing it for the upcoming season. Um, Summery, like it's usually more cotton, just machine washable, easy to wash. So those I just wash like normal laundry.
Mm-hmm.
I don't do like a batch all at once. Hey, what about you?
I am the opposite. So I have almost no closet storage in my house. It's a very old house. So I have to rely on, and I've got too many knits at this point. It's just out of control. So I try to put all of my sweaters away for summer and then bring out anything I'm going to wear for summer because it's just too hard to kind of shuffle through all the layers. Everything's stored in a cedar chest. So it's like your
Mm,
tub for your hue shift where I have to kind of excavate down to get something I really want. So I try and either
right.
pull everything up to the top that's kind of applicable for the season, or I try and pull them out and put them in my actual like clothing closet for the time that I'm going to wear them. But what I try to do is I do wash them at the end of the season because I realize I
Mm-hmm.
don't really like washing my woolens in the winter because they take so long to dry in my house.
Yeah.
So I like to do them on like the first sunny day. I will do a big load of with like Eucalyptus, which we have on the Knit Picks website. It's my favorite rinse-free wool wash, and I use that actually for my cottons as well. Anything that I've hand knit gets washed with that. So I just fill one of our little they're called the plastic tubs that are also on the website. I put that in my bathtub, put the Eucalyptus in, and then I put warm water in, and then fill it, and then gently press in my garments, let them soak until the water's cool. So it's kind of a long time. And then I lay them out in the sun to dry, or like the shade, but somewhere that's like a warm day so that they'll dry within the day,
Mm-hmm.
hopefully.
Nice.
um, and then I store them away. So I put them back in the cedar chest or in Tupperware containers that I put somewhere a little bit less, like maybe more my basement, where it's still dry, but maybe not as climate controlled. So
Cool.
let's, yeah, while we're in between topics, let's stop and say hi
Mhm.
to everybody who's joined.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Hello. This whole live thing is still pretty new to us. I think I always feel like I'm recording a podcast with you because
Right?
that's like what we usually do.
Hmm.
But then we're like, oh, wait, people are watching us right now in the moment.
Yeah.
Hi.
So if no one's listened to the podcast before, Lee and I are on there a lot. And this is
Mhm.
definitely the same format that we do when we record the podcast. It's very conversational. And if you want to listen to episodes when we're not streaming live, there are so many, I think 300 plus episodes. And
Yeah.
you can find the podcast. It's in the Learning Center, or the little Learn tab on the website, or you can search for the Nitpicks podcast on any of your streaming services. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what are we talking about today for everybody who's new to the feed, Lee?
So we're talking about like spring cleaning with regards to your knitting
Mm-hmm.
and just like organization and storage and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, I can show you my needle storage. I have a Knit
Yes.
Picks case, which
Mm-hmm.
usually is kept at the office. So that's my like kind of a bunch of commonly used needles. And then I have this homemade case, which is not great because I improvised it. I
I love
recommend if
it.
you want to make yourself one, like find a tutorial or a pattern. So it's like really good. Mine is kind of weird,
Oh, I
but
like the
yeah,
slanted
it's
storage.
fun. I like the craftiness of it. So I have like a bunch of interchangeables, DPNs, um, gauge ruler,
Mm-hmm.
useful stuff. I have some like stitch markers tucked in, and then straight. I actually use straight still sometimes, which is weird.
Really?
But yeah,
I
so
did not
once
know
in a
that.
while, yeah, if it's the right kind of project, I do.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so this is. I also have needles just like all over my house, like in bowls and
Yeah.
in projects, obviously. So this isn't like all of my needles, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I try to whenever they're not in projects, I try to kind of put them back away in cases so they're easy to find when I need them, that
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. Yeah.
I
But,
actually, it occurred to me that I don't store my cables that I'm not using or my fixed circular needles in any of our cases because I've just never gotten around to bringing one home. But I put them in my, it's like a bamboo steamer, which is circular and about this big. And that's actually what my computer is resting on right now, or I would show you. Um, but it's a perfect dimensions for coiling up your cables and letting them sit in there, and then you can just find them.
nice.
The only bummer is that I don't have them separated by size. So whatever storage solution you have, I recommend absolutely trying to figure out how to keep them separated by length or by size, because
Mm-hmm.
that's half of the battle for me is just figuring out where are my short ones and where are my long ones.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're a long time Knitpicks um, customer, you
Uh-huh.
might have some of our old needles that don't say the
Yes.
size on here. So that's why I have this. Like you want to keep one of these with your interchangeables so that you always can figure out what you have.
Agreed.
But
I have a lot of those just from working at Knitpicks for 9 years now. So I have a lot of the legacy needles, and I'm sure some of you
yeah.
out there do as well.
Mhm.
If there's any questions or anyone wants to ask
Yeah.
us anything, please chime in. We would love to answer your burning storage and yarn care questions. In the meantime, let's talk about how you store your yarn that you're not using currently, Lee. What do you do? Because it's like you've got your projects, but then if
Um,
it's in the queue.
yeah. Well, do you want to see some of my fancy storage, which is not in
Sure.
this room? Okay, I'm going
Yeah,
to
yeah.
give you a short tour. Yeah, I tend to pile it up on shelves in my studio, and then also tote bags
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. I have yarn everywhere, and I have a couple fun. I have this shelf here.
Oh, I've seen that tutorial on Pinterest and I always wanted to do it. Is it this old coffee or old oatmeal
Um,
casters?
yeah. I
Mm-hmm.
actually have a tutorial on my own blog from many years ago.
Maybe that's where I saw
And
it years ago, Lee, before you
yeah, I
worked here.
think it might
Is it
be.
a
I have this also. That's a wine
uh-huh.
case thing, which I've
Yeah.
repurposed for yarn.
Oh,
It's
I
hard
love
to show
it.
you with my laptop, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I have those for like my fun, pretty yarn.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all yarn is pretty, but
But some yarn is prettier
Um,
than others.
yeah. And then I have boxes and
Yeah.
bags and yeah.
Yeah. So I have a sort of unique issue where years ago I got a sheep fleece that I was going to clean and then spin and do all of that. But it turns out it had wool moths. So ever since then, I have been battling wool moths in my house. And
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
sure some of you are as well. If you're getting little holes in things or you see that your yarn is getting chewed, we get customers every once in a while emailing pictures in of yarn and I hate to say it, but sometimes it's wool moths that are in your house. And the best way that I found to control them is to clean everything out and then store it with cedar. So I store all of my sweaters with cedar blocks that we have on the website or the cedar boxes that we also have. Um, and then cleaning it regularly, letting it sit in the sun a little bit will help, but also making sure that everything is bagged. So all of my yarn is in Ziploc bags or the big, what do they call it? The compressible bag, like the vacuum seal, not vacuum seal,
Mhm.
but like the shrinky bags.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and then you can also freeze it and that will help, and then I store it all away so that way everything's isolated, and I do it by color for me, and I also do it by weight. So because I've worked at Knit Picks for so long, I actually have very little yarn from anywhere else, and if I do have it from somewhere else, I use it right away because it's novel. But I have a lot of palette, so I store all the palette together by colors, like all the blues go together, all the reds go together, and that way I can grab and go. How do you organize your yarn, Lee? Is it by weight? Is it by color?
Um, well, I try to
Fiber?
keep like families together, like all my hawthorn
Mm-hmm.
and palette, and kind of like in clumps. I'm mostly not super organized about that, but uh, yeah. Um,
Mm-hmm.
ideally, like I think I have like some sections of a lot of the same weight
Mm-hmm.
in one section or another. Um, I could be better. That's up to you and your personality and
Yeah.
how organized you want to get, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Absolutely.
in theory, it seems like a good idea to keep all of the same weight. I think as far as weight, color, fiber, different categories, I think weight makes the most sense because if you want to knit a pair of socks, you go look at all your sock yarn, or
Mm-hmm.
worsted weight sweater, you have all your worsted in one place.
Mm-hmm. I do tend to, I bundle everything together, except I do keep cotton separate from wool because to
Mm.
me, they have such different properties that I never really want to mix them personally. So I know that my cottons are inelastic, they don't really stretch. So I wouldn't normally use them for personally for like garments or socks or things like that, or lots of toys that I make. I prefer wool for those. So I tend to keep those two camps very separate. But everything else, like
Mm-hmm.
luxury and wool, kind of gets bundled together because I use them together more in projects more often than a luxury with a cotton.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one
Yeah.
of my methods. Another thing to think about is I see a lot of people storing their yarn already wound into cakes, and while that's super
Mm.
efficient, so like the minute they get it, they'll wind it into a cake and it's store it because it's pretty and it does stack nicely. But why would that be a bad idea, Lee? I see you
No,
shaking your
don't do
head.
that. Don't do that. No. So when you wind it into a cake, it stretches the yarn, and depending on how tightly the cake is wound, you can wind it more loosely if you
Mm-hmm.
try to, on purpose. But usually it's gonna stretch the yarn out just a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
which won't be a big deal if you're knitting it right away. But if you're storing it for a while, it's not good for the yarn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's bad for the yarn. Also could mess with your gauge. If you're knitting with it stretched and then you wash it, then it might, the gauge might change.
Right, especially
Yeah.
with like cottons, like they'll stretch out a little bit too, and wools because some fibers are really fluffy. They depend on the air being trapped in them. If you're
Mm-hmm.
winding it very tightly, and when I say winding, you can wind it into a ball by hand, and that's what I did for
Mm-hmm.
years and years and years until I started working at Knit Picks, and I got myself a ball winder in Swift, which I should have done the minute I started knitting. There's a couple of tools where I think it's one of those things where you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to invest in it because I'm not sure, but it
No,
makes
it's
it
worth it.
so much easier.
Yeah.
Um, and
I
just
got
saves you.
mine as a gift, and it was right after we moved to Portland. I had already been knitting for years and years, but my husband,
Mhm.
then boyfriend, got me a Swift and a ball winder for Christmas, and it was the best thing that ever happened to my knitting. Yeah.
Absolutely. If you know a new knitter or somebody who's knitted for a long time, that is like my go-to gift for them is immediately ball winder and Swift. Here you go. And what that is a Swift is a wooden. It looks like an umbrella that expands and holds your hank in a when a yarn is twisted into a hank. It looks like a kind of like a not a donut, but like yeah, there you go. So you can open up a hank, which is a round of yarn, and put that over, and it holds it in place. And the ball winder winds your yarn into what looks like a very like flat and kind of cube shaped ball. So not like a round ball that you see that's like kind of icon. Exactly. I knew you would have some. And
See,
that you
this is
can
my in progress sweater right now. So these are all pre-round because I'm
Mhm.
going to be knitting them right away. But I didn't wind them until I was ready.
Right.
Yeah.
So with that, it's so handy to knit from. So you can pull from the center, which means that your ball won't roll around. It just pulls nicely from the center of the ball. Kind of like if you're a sewer doing thread from a spool, it'll just kind of come off and it won't roll around. Or you can pull from the outside. And also I use it to knit two strands double. So I'll pull from the outside and the inside as I'm knitting if I want it to be double the thickness easily. So there's a bunch of things. It's easier to knit from that way, but it's not great for storage, even if it is pretty lovely to look at, and it makes things very uniform. So we're actually getting close to the end of today.
Yeah.
I know.
So
Lady,
people might be seeing this from our Knit Picks Facebook page, right? But do
right.
you know that we have a new group called Together We Knit, which is much more community, conversational. So definitely ask questions there. We'll be checking and answering and chat with each other and share your projects and all that.
That's where I've seen a lot of these huge shifts come through, and it's been really fun. I'm so glad we did this. It's a brand new group, but there's all I think over 1,500 people now. So
yeah, it's active. Every time I check, there's so many new posts. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we also have our newsletter that goes out, and you can sign up for that on our website. And also we are now partnering with Warm Up America, and you can learn more about that on our website. We have a lot of fun events that we're doing, and working with charity, and just keeping busy all the time.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the knitting business is one that doesn't stop when we're all at home. We're still knitting.
Yes, I don't think I will ever stop knitting. Knitting is my superpower, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you, Lee.
Yeah,
and
thanks.
in the meantime, join us at knitpicks.com.
Bye.
Bye. Until next week.
Yeah.